They thought it would be a routine expedition, a challenge for their strength and spirit. But what they found, no one could explain. To this day, more than 6 decades later, their final screams are still buried in the frozen winds of the Ural Mountains. This is the Dyatlov Pass Incident, and what happened there has haunted the world ever since. January 23, 1959, Yekaterinburg, Soviet Union. A group of 10 experienced hikers, students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute laughed and waved goodbye to their friends and families. Their goal, reach Mount Otorten in the northern Urals. Leading them was Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, disciplined, methodical, and passionate about the outdoors. The group was made up of elite hikers, among them Zinaida Kolmogorova, the heart of the team, Rustem Slobodin, calm and athletic, and Yuri Doroshenko, known for his resilience. The youngest, 21-year-old Lyudmila Dubinina, often wrote in her journal about the snow-covered beauty ahead. But one of them, Yuri Yudin, would be the only survivor. Plagued by illness just 2 days into the trip, he made the hardest decision of his life, to turn back. The remaining 9 trekked on. The landscape was surreal. Forests that groaned in the cold, snowfields so white they seemed to erase the sky. They laughed, sang songs, snapped photos with a borrowed camera, and documented their journey in journals, never knowing they were writing their own eulogies. By February 1st, they reached the eastern slopes of Kholat Syakhl, a name the native Mansi people called Dead Mountain. The weather worsened, heavy snow, cutting wind, visibility near zero. Instead of moving to the forest for shelter, they made camp on the open slope. The reasons? Perhaps they were disoriented. Perhaps Dyatlov didn't want to lose elevation. Whatever the cause, they dug into the snow and pitched their tent. It would be the last night they were ever seen alive. Weeks passed. No word, no signal, no return. Families begged for help. Soviet authorities began a search. On February 26, 1959, rescuers found the tent. It was slashed open from the inside. Snow covered the site, but traces remained. Bare footprints, some in socks, some completely barefoot, led away from the tent into the trees. 2 bodies were found under a cedar tree, stripped down to underwear, their hands raw, bark embedded under fingernails, signs of a fire nearby. 3 more were discovered between the cedar and the tent, as if they had tried to crawl back. Then came the most horrifying discovery. 2 months later, the final 4 bodies were found buried under 13 feet of snow in a ravine. They were worse, so much worse. One had a crushed skull, another's ribs shattered. One was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her face, and none of them showed signs of struggle. No external wounds, no bruises to match the injuries, just a mystery so chilling. Even the Soviet investigators buried the truth. When the rescuers reached the final 4 bodies, the horror changed. These weren't simply hikers lost in the cold. These were victims of something unnatural. And what Soviet authorities uncovered only raised more questions they buried along with the dead. May 1959, it took months to locate them. The final 4 bodies, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolovatov, Semyon Zolotaryov, and Nikolai Thibault Brignol, were found nearly 80 meters away from the cedar tree, buried deep in a ravine. But it wasn't just the location that horrified the searchers. It was what had been done to them. Thibault Brignol had a skull fracture so severe, it should have been fatal immediately. Lyudmila's ribs were crushed inward, 5 on the right side, as if she'd been hit by a high-speed car, or compressed by unimaginable force. But there were no external injuries, no signs of trauma to the skin. She was also missing her tongue, her eyes, some of her lips. Zolotaryov, the oldest member of the group, had crushed ribs and was missing his eyes too. Strangest of all, they were wearing parts of the other hikers' clothing, swapping items for warmth or something more desperate. Forensic experts couldn't explain the injuries. A Soviet doctor famously said, the force needed to cause such damage would be comparable to a car crash, yet there's no external bruising. Another twist, high levels of radiation were found on the clothing of some of the hikers, far beyond natural levels. Investigators sealed off the area immediately. Was it nuclear exposure? A secret weapons test, journal entries, and recovered cameras showed nothing unusual at first. But one final photo, taken by Semyon, shows a blurry figure standing at the edge of the tree line, humanoid, watching. The official Soviet conclusion? An unknown compelling force caused the deaths, but the public wasn't satisfied. How could they be? Alternative theories exploded across the USSR and the world. Avalanche. But the slope was too shallow, and the tent wasn't buried. Hypothermia-induced madness, but the injuries went far beyond freezing. Paranormal forces? Some believe the area is cursed. Sacred Mansi ground where spirit winds roam. Military cover-up? Locals reported strange orange lights in the sky the same night the hikers died. Witnesses were silenced. Records vanished. And what about the missing tongue? The radiation? The slashed tent from the inside? One of the rescuers later said, "It felt like the mountain wanted them gone, not just dead, but erased." In a secret report later declassified, a handwritten note was found, tucked into one investigator's file. No signature, just one sentence. The hikers didn't run from something outside the tent. They ran from something inside. They ran, barefoot into the ice and tore through the trees. They screamed, bled, and died. Not from cold, but from something they couldn't explain or escape. Decades later, even with reopened cases, advanced forensics, and satellite data, no one can answer the question, what happened that night in the tent? When the Soviet Union quietly closed the case in 1959, they called it a tragic accident. But internally, authorities argued. Witness reports had emerged. Strange lights in the sky that night. Military test flights. Some documents were redacted. Others vanished entirely. So what were the most disturbing theories that still terrify researchers to this day? Secret weapons test. Some believe the hikers were collateral damage, unwilling participants in a classified Soviet experiment. Local Mansi herders described hearing distant booms and seeing orange orbs in the sky. The night of February 1st, declassified memos later revealed that parachute mines were being tested in the region. These explode mid-air, consistent with the blast-like injuries suffered by the victims. But this doesn't explain the bizarre behavior, the fleeing half-naked, the missing tongue. Paranormal forces, the mountain's curse, the native Mansi people called the pass Kolat Shiakal, meaning mountain of the dead. To them, it wasn't just superstition, it was sacred danger. Legends speak of forest spirits and shapeshifters, entities that mimic voices and lure travelers into madness. Some believe the hikers encountered something non-human, something ancient, that forced them to rip out of the tent and run blind into the snow. Some survivors of later expeditions into the same area reported feelings of dread, unexplained, whispers and sightings of dark humanoid figures standing silently at night, just beyond the light. Infra-sound madness, the wind experiment. In 2003, a Swiss scientist theorized that rare wind patterns in the pass created infrasound, low-frequency vibrations that cause panic, paranoia, and physical discomfort. If true, this might explain why the hikers fled in confusion, tearing out from the inside, believing something was attacking them. But it still doesn't explain the injuries, the radiation, the missing body parts. The Yeti theory, it sounds absurd until you look at the evidence. One of the last photos taken by the group, dubbed Frame 17, shows a shadowy, upright figure lurking between the trees. The autopsies, broken ribs, missing facial features, and defensive wounds. Even a satirical newspaper headline that appeared shortly after read, "The abominable snowman lives in the Urals." In 2019, the Russian government reopened the case, citing public pressure. But again, they settled on a controlled avalanche, a conclusion many still reject. Modern simulations found that under precise conditions, a slab of snow could cause panic. But even the lead investigator admitted, "We proved how they may have died, but not why they ran." And here's the part most people don't know. In 2020, an independent Swiss lab tested fabric samples from the hikers' clothing. Radiation levels were still high, not trace, active, but the source, unknown. Today, hikers still visit Dyatlov Pass, some to honor, some to uncover answers. But many don't stay the night. Locals refuse to guide tourists there after dark. Some say they still hear screams in the snow. Some say the wind whispers in Russian. And every so often, a new theory emerges, more unsettling than the last. One survivor of a 1999 expedition claimed he woke up in his tent at 2:30 a.m. to the sound of fabric tearing, only to find the tent flap still sealed shut. But on the snow outside, footsteps circled his camp. Just one pair, barefoot. Dyatlov Pass Incident is not just a mystery, it's a wound in history, one that never healed. 9 brilliant, adventurous lives ended in terror. The photos they took, the journals they left behind, all stopped abruptly on February 1st, 1959. And the last entry in the group's diary? We now know that snowmen exist, but no one ever found out what kind of snowman they meant.